Right. It is coming up to 11 o'clock. After 11, we are going to be talking about the bottle deposit return scheme. Now, this is going to be introduced in Scotland by 2021. So it will be plastic, glass and metal drinks containers will be returnable by 2021. And of course, a lot of local shops are going to be the ones who are going to be handling most of this. So we're going to be talking to a group of people who'll be involved in that after 11, just to see exactly how that's going to work. And also I want you to continue getting. Now, earlier this year, the Scottish Government announced plans to introduce a bottle deposit return scheme for plastic, glass and metal drinks containers by 2021. England are also considering a similar plan, but they're a bit further behind. So how is it going to work in practice? Joining me this morning, Councillor Mo Razak, who is a member of the National Federation of Retail Newsagents. He's got a shop in Blantyre. Morning, Mo.
Morning.
Good morning. And we're also joined by David Barnes, who's a Zero Waste Scotland Programme Manager for Deposit Return. Hi, David.
Good morning.
Good morning. And with experience from Berlin, where she's based, Scottish freelance journalist Rachel Loxton. Good morning to you, Rachel.
Morning.
Good morning. So, Mo, I think a lot of the responsibility for this scheme is going to fall on the shoulders of you and your colleagues in the kind of small shop business, yeah?
Yes, it is.
So what can you tell me about it?
Well, from the figures that I've came from Zero Waste Scotland, we're going to have 14,100 outlets that are going to be returning deposits manually, and there's going to be 3,100 outlets that are going to have machines in Scotland.
Okay, so there's a machine that is capable of doing this job more quickly and efficiently, presumably, but it sounds as if only a small percentage of your outlets are going to have that. Why is that?
It's down to space, and also with the amounts that are getting returned, because the machine's going to cost the retailer money, and they need to justify that through the handling fee. If they're not getting enough returns coming through, then it's going to cost the retailer. He'll need to fork out from his own pocket.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose with any new scheme that's introduced, the people who are going to be directly responsible for making it all happen are going to have concerns. And Mo, I know that, as I say, you and your colleagues do have some questions about how this is going to work. Let me just bring in David for the kind of big picture of the bottle return scheme and what its intentions are and how it would ideally work, David.
Yeah, so I mean, there are two main reasons for introducing a deposit return scheme in Scotland, which I think most of your listeners will be familiar with. One of that is the climate crisis and the need to take serious action to address carbon emissions, and introducing a deposit return scheme will take about 4 million tonnes of carbon out of Scotland's emissions over 25 years. That's the equivalent of about 85,000 cars coming off the road every year.
Because the material will be recycled as opposed to going to landfill.
That's right. So it's about capturing the more material for recycling and better quality material for recycling.
Okay.
So effectively we create a circular economy where these bottles and cans can be recycled into new bottles and cans, which means we don't need to take new material out of the ground to do that. And then the other reason for doing it, which again I'm sure your listeners will be familiar with the sort of Blue Planet 2 effect, is litter, and litter has a huge effect in Scotland. We estimate about £361 million per year, and in terms of volume, drink containers make up a significant amount of that. So we can take a huge chunk out of the litter problem that Scotland has, as well as contributing to tackling the climate crisis. So two big reasons to do it. Mm-hmm. In terms of how it works on the ground in practice, what effectively a deposit return scheme does is motivate individuals to return these drinks containers by putting a 20 pence deposit on when you buy them. And when the Cabinet Secretary announced the scheme in May, she used a great phrase: people have to get used to borrowing the bottle. So the idea is that you pay that 20 pence, but when you've finished with it, you can take the bottle or can back to any shop that sells these drinks, and you get that 20 pence back.
Right, any shop, so it doesn't have to be the shop that you bought it from?
No, absolutely not. Any shop that sells a drinks container will be required to take any drinks container back.
Okay, and so your bottle of water routinely for kind of £1 will be £1.20?
That's right, but you get that 20 pence back when you return that.
Right, okay. And are the retailers obliged then to take part in this scheme?
So what happens for the retailers is the draft regulations which the Scottish Government laid in September means any retailer who sells these drinks containers will be required to act as a return point. What they are looking to do is any costs that retailer incurs for acting as a return point will be reimbursed through what's called a handling fee. So regardless of whether it's in both of those circumstances that Mo just described, so whether you buy a machine or you take it back manually, then you get a handling fee to compensate you for the costs and time involved in facilitating that.
Okay. Well, before we go back to Mo and get his thoughts on, how this is going to be implemented and potential challenges, Rachel, that this has been the case in Berlin for a long time, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been in Germany since 2003, and it works in the way that you guys have been saying, that you go to the shop, you buy a bottle, you pay the deposit on it. But interestingly, in Germany, there's a difference between the single-use bottles and the reusable bottles. So you would pay a 25-cent deposit for the single-use bottles. And for the reusable bottles, it's around 8 to 15 cents.
Right.
So it's a little bit different, I think, compared to what Scotland is planning.
Okay. And generally, in terms of people's habits, or, is it just kind of second nature for people?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Germany is recycling mad. Everyone recycles everything in Germany. So this is just part of the system here. Basically, almost all German supermarkets have these huge return machines, and they're kind of like the reverse vending machines. You put the bottle in, it scooshes it around, tries to find the barcode, and then it will either accept it, or some aren't actually accepted, and you do have to return them to the shop you bought them from. But it's actually not such a burden on the smaller shops. People really tend to focus on the supermarkets for recycling.
Right, okay. Well, that's interesting. So Mo, is this more going to be on smaller shops or supermarkets or both?
Well, from the figures that came out from the report, the 3,100 reverse vending machines are going to account for 93% of the returns, and the 7% of the returns that are left will be through the manual handling machines.
Right. Just take us through it a little bit then, Mo. So, I mean, is your industry on board with this? I mean, how do you feel about it? You run a shop in Blantyre. How do you feel about it?
Well, we supported this in 2017 from the onset, even before it was announced in our Scottish conference in Glasgow. And the reason we supported was we felt there was a need for, deposit return because of what David was saying about the two main reasons, about littering and also for climate crisis. But the thing I would also say is that even though we support this, there's a few questions that need to be answered, because, like I said, this is going to be a fair bit of change for the smaller retailer, and the retailer's under pressure just now as it is.
Right, so what problems do you foresee then?
Well, firstly, the handling fee is for the machines. It's expected to be 3.1 pence per container, and for the manual, that's the one that the shopkeeper will take the bottle or the can and put it into a bin for storage. Will be 1.5 pence, 1.5 pence. Now, we think that the manual handling, they're underestimating the amount of work involved, especially since glass is going to be included in it, especially cans and plastic are easy enough, easy to manage, but glass is a lot heavier, bulkier, and it needs a lot more attention.
Right.
The second thing is that your average store that you go to, Kay, is quite small, So, see, behind the counter, you'll need to put in 2 containers to hold these returns. That's going to be a bit of a problem. And also, say for the glass bottles, especially the beer bottles and wine bottles, the smell as well. Because if the people aren't returning as much, then that build-up in that container might take a week for that bag to fill and things like that. And also, I'll probably say that the initial cost, see in the shop you visit, every drinks container for alcohol and soft drinks will have 20 pence added onto it. That will add thousands of pounds of outlay for the retailer right away. So it's going to cost the retailer a fair bit of money.
Oh, so when you're buying the product wholesale, the 20p will be on it there as well?
Yes.
Ah, right. Okay. I get that. I mean, David, as Mo said, he and his colleagues were, in principle, very much behind the aspirations of this scheme and want to support it. But I suppose it's like anything that requires behavioural change. For it to be successful, you have to make it as easy as possible for people, don't you? If, at this early stage, Mo and his colleagues are sort of seeing potential problems, that's not necessarily a good start.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's about making it as simple as possible, and the sort of turn of phrase that I use is it should be as simple to return the bottle as it is to buy one, and that's the reason why the regulations require all retailers to take part. Absolutely hear what Mo's saying, and I think that's the reason why we are working with industry through our implementation advisory group. And the reason why the scheme is actually going to be run by industry as well. So we think that the best way to deliver this is through industry-led, not-for-profit company that can establish rules to make this as simple as possible for retailers and for producers who are going to be involved in making this a success for Scotland. So we've seen these operating in all of these countries around Europe, so all the Scandinavian countries, the Baltic companies. We've seen it in Germany as well, as Rachel was describing. And what we want to do is take the learning that's appropriate from elsewhere, but also listening to what Mo's saying, to sort of recognise that there are differences for Scotland. We need a unique scheme for Scotland. And we think that having the Scottish industry and Scottish producers and retailers involved in operating it will make sure that it works and does exactly what you've said, which is make it as simple as possible for the consumer to return. I mean,
Rachel was saying that in Germany it tends to be the supermarkets that take the bulk. Are the supermarkets on board with this?
So they are part of the groups that I mentioned earlier in terms of the implementation advisory group. I think everyone needs to understand how it's going to operate in practice. That's what people are keen to hear now, is what does this mean for me in terms of what machines do I need to use, what containers are people going to use for taking things back manually.
I mean, is this not something that could be automated? I'm not trying to be a smarty pants here and come up with it, but given that a lot of people do take back bottles to, bins, they've had a good Saturday night. I mean, if that was automated in some way and the procedure could be done there, would that not be the place to do it?
So the reverse vending machines that were described earlier do automate the process, and we expect about 85 to 90% of materials to go back through those reverse vending machines. But the key thing about diverting it to those and away from your normal bins is that you get that benefit in terms of quality. And the other challenge as well about doing it with the bin is that it's the 20 pence that motivates people who aren't recycling currently. So currently in Scotland, we only recycle about just over half of these drinks containers, despite the fact that they're very easy to recycle. So through the scheme, a target is actually being set in regulation to recycle 90% of these containers. So you can see it's a huge change, and that's the reason why you get those benefits I described at the very beginning.
Right. So 2021, we're hoping that the scheme will be operational by then. I'm sure lots of conversations will be going on between all the relevant parties between now and then. So that's when we as consumers can expect this to be part of our daily lives, is it, David?
So the Cabinet Secretary has said that she wants to see the scheme operational in this parliamentary term, which is absolutely 2021. We are working with industry to work out what the right date is for that. and add some of that detail that people are describing. But yes, we think that a sort of reasonable time frame means 2021 is achievable. And you've got this fantastic opportunity for Scotland to be seen to be leading in the United Kingdom. And also, although it is just drinks containers, we also think that the fact that this will impact on every single person in the country gives us this real opportunity to engage with people and help to change people's behaviour across a whole range of things, not just the materials that are directly in scope of the deposit return scheme.
Okay, well, we'll be keeping tabs on it along the way. David, thank you very much. David Barnes from Zero Waste Scotland, and good luck, Councillor Mo Razak, member of the National Federation of Retail Newsagents, and thanks very much for your experience from Germany. That's Rachel Loxton.